who has not been a big Donald Trump fan, but is essentially saying that it is time for these two to understand what they have in common a little bit more than what they differ on. And here's a look at a quote from Dan Henninger's piece in the Journal this morning. He says, Donald Trump has a better way of putting it. Make America great again. Paul Ryan's version, the one that runs back to Ronald Reagan and Jack Kemp, is restore economic growth. Donald Trump and Paul Ryan should use Thursday's meeting as the start of a conversation on restoring economic growth. Both men understand that. Barack Obama's 7 years of 0 to 2% growth is killing the American public. Reversing that Obama economic legacy is essentially the only thing Paul Ryan thinks about. It is the reality that has made Donald Trump the party's presumptive nominee. Steve Hayes, is he right?
Yeah, I think it'll be broader than that. I don't think they're going to get into policy specifics like that. I expect that they're going to talk more broadly about principles that they might share in common and, broader values that they might share in common, ways that they might work together. But let's be clear, there is a pretty significant chasm on those issues. I mean, not just specific policy issues, but on sort of a broad outlook. Their conceptions of what it means to be a Republican, what it means to be a conservative. And I think this is the beginning of that dialogue.
But, Steve, he's saying it's all about economic growth. It's all about putting people back to work. It's all about generating new jobs and new economic opportunities in this country. And on that, it's, to me, the biggest issue of divide here is the question of cutting back benefits, cutting back entitlements in order to make those programs solvent again. And perhaps that needs to be put aside for the moment, and the focus needs to be on economic growth. Quick thought, Steve, and then I want to show everybody something at home.
Yeah, I do expect that they will focus on what they have in common rather than what they don't agree on. But I think, again, you can't overstate, it's hard to overstate just how significant that difference is. Paul Ryan came back to Congress after the 2006 elections dedicated to reforming entitlements. Donald Trump has basically said he's opposed to reforming entitlements, although he had a policy advisor who yesterday opened the door a little crack to maybe some discussion on that.
Yeah, Donald Trump said that cuts in Medicare would be political suicide back when Paul Ryan first suggested that idea and said that it was the agenda for the Republican Party. I want to take everybody back down back down the road here and take a look at the back and forth between the two men who are meeting right now behind closed doors. Watch this.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
Normally, I do not comment on what's going on in the presidential election. I will take an exception today. This is not conservatism.
Everything that you don't want is in that budget. And I say, where was Paul Ryan?
If he becomes the nominee of the party, will you support him?
Yes, I will. I'll support whoever our nominee is.
Remember the wheelchair being pushed over the cliff when you had Ryan chosen as your vice president? That was the end of that campaign, by the way, when they chose Ryan.
If a person wants to be the nominee of the Republican Party, there can be no evasion and no games.
Paul Ryan, I don't know him well, but I'm sure I'm going to get along great with him. And if I don't, he's going to have to pay a big price.
And I just laughed out loud, I think. Sometimes reality's stranger than fiction around here these days. I'm a good-natured guy, so I get along with everybody.
How do you like Paul Ryan? How do you like him? You like him? Or you don't like him? All right.
Now you have a presumptive nominee, Donald Trump. Will you support him?
Some pretty harsh words in the past, Monica. How do these two men put it together?
Yeah, it's called politics, Martha. Look, Donald Trump has been running in a very hotly contested Republican primary race. Now that he is the party's nominee, or soon will be, he's taking on a different role. And I think today is the start of a constructive negotiation. Both of these men, Paul Ryan and Donald Trump, are deal makers. And they both understand the need to bring this party together to win in the general election in the fall. There are sharp stylistic and substantive differences, as Steve pointed out, on a number of issues. I expect that there won't be a deep dive into policy today. But Donald Trump needs Paul Ryan. He needs Paul Ryan to reassure conservatives. He's going to need Paul Ryan to shepherd through things like tax reform and entitlement reform if President Trump is so inclined to pursue those things. And, you know, Paul Ryan understands that Donald Trump is leading a populist revolt against the very establishment Paul Ryan represents. And that if he is the president, Paul Ryan is going to need him as well to do the things that concern Paul Ryan, entitlement reform, tax reform, and other things. Economic growth, though, the thing that you started this segment with, Dan Henninger's piece, is absolutely right. And Donald Trump is smart enough to know that. Jobs in the economy are the #1 issue for voters across the board. You see it in poll after poll. They are living this Obama economy on the ground every day and have been for the last 7+ years. And Donald Trump understands, and the rest of the GOP establishment should get on board with this as well, that if they're going to win in the fall, they need to have a pro-growth economic message that they hit every single day.
Yeah. You know, obviously Trump has been a little bit more conciliatory in his tone, Steve, but the underlying theme that you hear in this, and we heard it from Eric Trump last night as well, is yes, they would like Paul Ryan to be on board. They would like them to find a détente, some way to move forward together. But if he doesn't, they feel that they are winners, that they have been winning all along, and that Paul Ryan represents, you know, a guy who was not able to close the deal when he ran for vice president, and that they have the stronger position.
Yeah, I don't actually think Donald Trump has been much more conciliatory. I mean, if you look at the past week, that you've had comments like the one that you mentioned from Eric Trump. You have Sarah Palin, a prominent Trump surrogate, suggesting that she's going to work hard to get Paul Ryan out of office. You had suggestions from Donald Trump himself that Paul Ryan might have to be removed if he doesn't get on board. So I don't think there's been a lot of conciliatory language. I expect that we'll get some today. I think that is probably what we're most likely to see coming out of the meeting today, is putting that tough week in the past and some nicer language about beginning a constructive dialogue and the kind of things that Monica was suggesting.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think in the past 24 hours we have heard that from Donald Trump. You know, he said, I think Paul Ryan's a good guy. I'm looking forward to meeting him. So it's going to be very interesting to see the tone when they both come out. Thanks very much. Steve Hayes, Monica Crowley, always good to have you both.
Thanks,
Martha.
Martha.
20 minutes before the hour, we find out now a national newspaper in Washington is signing a platoon of reporters to look into Donald Trump's past, and it will write a book about it. Is that a step too far? Howard Kurtz weighs in on that, and you remember this, right? What a day. 3 years ago, the explosion devastating the town of West Texas. Now we know, finally, what caused that horrific and deadly explosion.
Specific issues, and that neither side is expecting the other to change their positions. Ryan has not said what exactly he needs to hear from Trump in order to support him, and says they do not, and Trump's camp says they do not expect Ryan to endorse Trump after a single meeting. And of course, we'll hear more from Ryan about how this meeting went at his weekly press conference at 11:30. And until then, we'll be keeping a close eye on all of these meetings. Steve, Brian, Nansley.
All right. Yeah. Tenny, where it's loud there, demonstrators chanting undocumented outside the RNC before Trump arrives. Says they are undocumented.
So what you're seeing there is the front of the headquarters where Garrett was standing with all those protesters. It looks like Donald Trump and Paul Ryan are coming in from the back, right, from that back alley.
And then there are some people that are already aboard with Donald Trump, and one of them is Kevin McCarthy. He made that clear yesterday. He's even going to help him accrue as many votes as possible for the primary in California, where he's in fact from. And there's other people that are on board, including Chairman Michael McCall, who also seems firmly.
That's right. By the way, Trump is not expected to meet with members of Congress who back him or go into the Capitol itself or office buildings as well. All right, more Fox and Friends, live from Washington and New York next.
We'll read some of your emails.
But it's interesting when you look at the posturing of the...
When I first took
Billy needed.
Okay, now as far as details, when we get around the noon Eastern time hour, we'll probably hear from Trump, and we'll probably hear from Paul Ryan and even Mitch McConnell, because the meetings will have concluded around that time. So as voters and viewers looking on the outside trying to analyze this and figure out where is the meeting of the minds, how far down the field will both sides push that football today? Is this considered just to continue the metaphor, is this a first down or is it a touchdown? Oh,
it's a first down. It's a first down. It's not going to go very far. I mean, nobody's going to come out and say, you know, I've just decided I've been wrong most of my career, and now I agree with the other guy. Look for them to talk about principles, to say we discussed, some of the principles that are near and dear to Republicans, like pro-life or like the proper relationship between Congress and the executive. Do not look for them to discuss anything in detail about immigration or about entitlements or about any of the other issues that Donald Trump has basically completely left Republican orthodoxy on. So nothing in detail, not a lot of issue-oriented stuff, broader talk about policies. It was good to get to know each other, and we all want the best for America.
In summary, do you think Trump can go forward with this nomination without Paul Ryan's support, without solid conservative support behind him? Yes or no?
Yes, he can, but I think the bigger question is, for Paul Ryan, can the Republican Speaker of the House not support the Republican nominee for president? I think Paul Ryan will be the one who is increasingly under pressure. Remember, we still have more primaries to go. We have California, we have Washington, Oregon. Trump will keep piling up votes. Already he's gotten more popular votes in the primaries than Mitt Romney did in 2012. I think the pressure will actually be on Paul Ryan to come around and eventually support the nominee of his party.
Fascinating. Thank you, Byron. Analysis there in Washington, D.C. We've got a lot of cameras down there, as you can tell. Paul Ryan has said that, they've met face-to-face one time, and that was 4 years ago. I think
we talked on the phone in March.
Yeah, just about a month ago. And it wasn't a long conversation, but it was a conversation. And so, when they say we're still getting to know each other, they're not lying about that.
Yeah,
they are still getting to know each other.
Don't be surprised if we hear that, the things that bring us together are greater than the things that we have not in common. I mean, improving the economy is the single most important thrust of what Paul Ryan wants to do and also what Donald Trump wants to do. And I would look for them to have common territory and leave the rest to the side on many of those other issues.